Welcome to the Midwest side, those groups that the narratively driven podcast you'll ever turn right. I'll be in the fall. We get your boss dice rolling below in the swamp, never stolen, no to the Dogs of Warcry.
Dogs of Warcry is a new podcast from the Mortal Realms, focusing on Warcry, a fast-paced, cinematic skirmish game by Games Workshop. Join us for discussions on gameplay, rules, lore, painting, terrain building, campaigns, and events. My name is Eric, or Stone Monk Gamer, and answering the call with me this episode is Thrallmaster Josh. How you doing, man?
Excellent, thank you.
And Bottle Finder himself, Paven. How's it going?
Pumped up.
It's been a little bit since we've recorded. We had a little bit of a cheat episode last time, as we've been calling it. How's the last few weeks been going for you guys?
Great, doing hobby stuff and catching up on some projects around the house, but also helping with the event that we had a couple weeks ago. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, Paven, what have you been up to?
Warhammer wise, I've been up to a lot of hobby and a lot of games. It's kind of taken a back seat over the last week because of other stuff, but yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, work can be lame sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Real life, yeah.
Real life. We got the holidays coming up, and sometimes that can be a boon for the hobby, and sometimes that can be time with family and that kind of stuff. Why don't we get into some specifics? Paven, since the last time we recorded, tell us a little bit about what you were able to accomplish. What have you gotten done?
So I got a pretty good list here. I was thinking that maybe I hadn't done as much hobby, but after writing it all down and forgetting things and then having to remember and put them on the list, maybe I have been productive, although that's kind of tapered down, but taking full advantage of like the hiatus we went on, time since last show. I finished the Defiled Ruins up, so I had a couple more buildings there, and I have my nice little terrain set I can play on. I repainted 4 Ardboys with shields. So I bought the new Orc War Clans book, and Ardboys with shields are more important in there. So I dug up and found some shields and rebuilt them and gave them a fresh coat of paint because they're getting pretty old there. This is like not quite Warcry, but it's still Age of Sigmar universe. I finished my Umbral Spell Portals, which were the last malign sorcery spells I had from that box from a year and a half ago. So that was nice to cross off the list.
Nice.
And then I have another hobby goal to paint something off the Deep backlog, which I hide in my attic. So I've been digging out a couple stuff there. One of the things that I've been messing around with, but don't quite have like a nice scheme or anything for, was one of Leopold's Leopards, that old mercenary company from Warhammer Fantasy Battles. And I've been trying to get like a Living City color scheme going with them. So that's been cool to work on, but I threw all of that stuff back into the backlog because I started to work on my Varengard, and and another project I'm very excited about, but we'll get into the details more later.
Absolutely.
But that's it for me.
Josh, you've been working on a lot of stuff. I asked for a lot of help in the lead up to our event a couple weeks ago. What all were you able to get done over the last couple weeks?
As you had mentioned, working on the Plunging Spires event, and so in preparation for that, I had a lot of own personal hobby goals in terms of getting my starter Warcry set painted up, or at least base coated, so that it was appropriate for the event. I also got my Shattered Stormbolt painted up, base coats. Still need to do some dry brushing and detail work, but really happy with the color schemes I've got, and it's going to be much easier to kind of work on those and get those finished up, which I'm definitely excited about. Printed off a bunch of stuff for the event, and that all went well. So we'll definitely talk about that in another episode. And this last week or so, my big hobby success was getting 8 more pair of Foxeers sculpted on my Cypher Lord. So now I could prime them, and I could start painting them, and hopefully get the whole warband painted up in time before the next event, or hopefully before the end of the holidays, get them all set and ready to go. And as Paven alluded to, we also picked up my Varengard and have started working on that.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, my hobby has also been heavily kind of intertwined with the event, which this episode we're going to be talking about running League and that sort of thing. And next episode we're going to dig into the Plunging Spires event, and just a quick shout out to everybody who attended and everybody who couldn't attend that wanted to. We had a fantastic weekend. A lot of, I don't know, a lot of people bought in quickly for a one-day event, and I was very, very humbled and thankful for that. It made for a really fun time. But a lot of it was trying to get all of the resources that we have, whether it be, Paven, you lent your Defiled Ruins to the event, and Josh, you had kind of were finishing up a lot of your terrain in order to be used for the event, and the writing rules, painting models last minute, that sort of thing. So all the fun stuff that you would think, if you're going to an event and you're painting a warband that you're doing, and well, as the event runner, I was doing the exact same thing. So, and I had to keep stopping myself from having ideas that could go into it because I just did not have the time to implement them. So, but in the kind of aftermath of that, I guess my biggest hobby was I came back home with all of that stuff, and I had to do something with it because I had created a bunch of stuff that I did not have in my stored away before, and so I had to purge a bunch of stuff and make room and rearrange and clear out the hobby room, and it was kind of nice to have that kind of reset going into a couple of projects, and kind of, I don't know, I always like not having any commitments per se, like getting done with something big and then having kind of the space to breathe. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we got a lot done because of that deadline. So I'm kind of eager to add a new deadline, and then we'll talk about that here in a second too. But yeah, so that's been my hobby. Why don't we move on to battles in the 8 points? And Josh, why don't you kick us off with some games you've been playing?
So as part of that, we did start our second league during this the last 4-week period, and so we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But the league, I restarted my warband, Cypher Lords, Envoys of Madness. So they started from scratch just because my stepson Ben had done the same, and I was like, okay, we'll do the same thing. So we've picked up a Fated quest, and we just entered into week 3. Or finished week 3. We started week 4, I think. Or no, we're in week 3. That's right. Get it all mixed up. But it had a lot of fun games so far. Played against Flesh Eater Courts and played against Ideneth, Deepkin, which warbands I hadn't played against before, and really got a sense for how they play and the challenges that they'll face for my particular warband. Had a good game against you, Eric, where I got to stop your convergence, and had a few games with Paven where I've won some and lost some. So they've all been really fun games, though. So it's been a great start so far for the second league.
Paven, what kind of games you been playing?
Well, I first want to highlight that Eric is still unvictorious in his final convergence. I guess maybe I don't want to steal your thunder.
No, I don't think you guys are too worried about stealing my thunder. You're stealing it right from underneath me.
In case the listener missed out, Eric is still unconverged. And speaking of convergences, I was able to finish my bottle quest. I know a lot of our listeners are probably closely tracking the progress of Skitrag and the Squig Squad. But they were able to do it. They, broke into the laboratory and stole all of the glassware, and then, brought it to their hideout, and are filling it with potions and lotions and drugs and funguses. So, it's a heroic moment for the Squigs. It was a fun game versus Josh. It was very close. It was nice to have to defeat the end boss of my Warhammer games to complete the quest. Josh being the end boss. I also had 300 more points than he had. He had just started. So yeah, that was a great game. I played a number of other games, including at the Plunging Spires. I played 4 games that day. But a highlight of that game was another game versus Josh, where Eric made up the rules. We were playing on the Loon Shrine table, and the rule of the game was every time you activate your any fighter, you roll a die 6 on a 1. Sometimes a 1 or a 2, your opponent gets to activate them, which was something I was not looking forward to at all to play with. Bad times. And I was playing the Iron Jaws, and certainly a number of times my war boss or my leader was about to wah, and then he just gets confused and wanders off in the other direction. And so those were really tense and fun moments, and it actually was a great game. And it was super close. And it came down to like one attack on one activation to finish it off. That was definitely a highlight. And then today I actually played 2 more games with Josh. I guess I just only play Josh. I played 2 more games today. Lost both of those. I've restarted I started a new quest with the Squig Squad, but I didn't wipe out their progress because why would you do that? So they still had all their destiny, and Josh was able to come out on top of both of those games. Yeah.
All those destiny points, though, man.
Yeah, they were good. It kept me in it, really. But let me think. Yeah, we're going to start on the Slaves and Master quest because that one felt the least, I don't know. It felt like, I don't know, goblins might muck up around there. I like going questing for a super sword is like, nah, that's too intense for us goblins. But my side quest is to actually assemble the Gobapalooza. So as I dominate territories again, I can slowly bring in allies, and I want to bring in the whole crew of the wise gits because now we have the glassware to support them all. Yeah. With their various potions. So
perfect.
And that's, I think I get more motivated when there's like a hobby tied to my games as well.
Definitely.
But I got to finish my Baron Guard before that.
One of my favorite of the Gobapalooza is the guy who has like the cook pot. So make sure you save 1 bottle for some good barbecue sauce or something.
Yeah, the brew pit's great. I mean, they're all great. They're actually my favorite sculpts of that release that I don't have them yet.
Oh man.
I don't know.
Excellent.
Better remedy that. Very cool. Very cool. I also played Josh. We wanted to do some play testing of the monster hunting, the challenges, because neither of us had a chance to play that, and we had a few things in the Plunging Spires where we had monsters, and we didn't have as much of a grasp of how that would play out. And so this last league night, he and I took turns playing against Davies Cygor, and it was cool. It was fun doing something new and different, and having that. But the Cygors, I think we determined, is probably on the low end of the challenge spectrum, and so there wasn't as many climactic moments with that. But we also think that there's a couple of things that we would probably have ruled a little bit differently or played a little bit differently in hindsight. I think, kind of we're on a little bit of a quest to figure out 2v1, kind of 2 players versus 1 monster kind of scenario to figure that out. So we're kind of making our way. So each of our warbands got to do a challenge and fight the Cygor, and both were victorious in different ways. In fact, my main pup, Sakubi-Doo, was slain because of the big Cygor, and Ashudna got really angry, and he ended up doing 24 wounds to it, and then he did 18 and another 18, and then even after it was dead, he did another 18. It was a mournful moment. If this was a movie, that would have been raining, and there'd been hiding the tears running down his face. So
it might have been one of the weather conditions, actually.
And yes, as
just blood rain.
Yeah, as reported, I've swung twice at my final convergence, and both times missed by maybe 1 model or something like that. And this last time, I usually have pretty good luck with my plains runners, hitting hard, but they couldn't take down one of your. Is it a mirror blade or was it a mindborn or mind? Yeah,
it was a mirror blade. Yeah,
so a little bit, not much tougher, but it was 3 plains runners hacking at this guy and couldn't take him down. So I didn't deserve it, and that's okay. That's okay. I will show you all that I'm worthy. But it's been fun. It's been fun trying to finish this up. I'm kind of, I've got some Stormcasts that are in some purple power already being stripped, so I can paint them up for Warcry. And really, I think that's what you guys are afraid of is me coming out with another warband and
big
whatnot.
Fat crossbows. Yeah.
Yep. So that's what I've been up to, and it's been good. Playing some games and starting the league again, and looking forward to kind of those regular game nights each week. So we'll see what happens as we get more games in. All right. As we're needing to combine a little bit of hobby and a little bit of battle, let's talk about the hobby battle. And Josh, why don't you explain kind of how this came to be and what we're doing?
Sure. So in one of our previous episodes, we kind of started this discussion where it was right after Monsters and Mercenaries had come out, and we saw that there was a Varangard warband that you could fight against in one of the challenge battles. And it kind of started a discussion amongst the three of us. And I was like, oh, we could get a Varangard box and split it up. Each person could have a Varangard. It'd be a great start for this, and then we could paint it with a different theme and have our own, warband challenge battles. And so that idea kind of hung around for a while. And then, I don't know, was it 3-4 weeks ago, we decided to do it, to go ahead and get the Varangard box, split up the models. We each have one Varangard to work on. And Eric started working on his right away for the Plunging Spires event. But as a side to that, Vint, our local Warhammer rep, store runner, he said, well, why don't you guys have a friendly painting competition for it? And so we had a little discussion. We decided, well, that could be a lot of fun. We got the Varangard. It'd be good motivation to get us all to paint it up. And that's kind of started the hobby battle here.
Yeah, so we are going to be getting started on working on that over this next week. We've already started, but we're going to try and finish up by our next episode. We'll be all done, and we'll have put them somewhere for everybody to take a look at. Do some judging on. We'll have to figure that out.
Yeah, but we're going to put them somewhere likely on the internet where you could look at them.
Yeah. Not just somewhere in somebody's house.
Mortal Realms page.
In an art gallery.
Twitter. Yeah, in the art gallery. Yes, indeed.
So we'll get them somewhere where we can share them online, and people can vote on them, and you can vote for your favorite podcast host. Model, and. And hopefully
they'll be blinded. They'll all be blinded.
And we'll just hoping with that will inspire, and with the new Slaves to Darkness stuff coming out, which we'll talk about in a minute. We'll get these warbands up for challenges for our local group and inspire some of you to paint up your own. So, all right, let's jump into the news. The first bit of news, Adepticon events have been posted, and if you had a keen eye, there are 2 Gibbering Dome events happening on the Thursday and the Friday of Adepticon, and I apologize I don't have those dates in front of me. That Thursday, one of those Gibbering Dome events is going to be a Warcry event, and it's going to be put on by us. Yeah, our buddy Paul, who's been on the show and from the Mortal Realms crew, is doing the Friday Narrative AOS event. It's a one-day event. It's usually 1,000 points, but you can go check that out. And then we're on the Thursday before that doing a Warcry event, probably 1,000 points. You can go and check that out. We've got space for 24 players, and we're still figuring out what we're going to do for that. We kind of know the space we're going to be in, some of the story we're going to tell. The registration opens December 8th. So if you're coming to Adepticon in Schaumburg, Illinois, and are interested in playing some narrative Warcry with us, then come and check that out. Go register, get on the list, and we look forward to seeing you there. And then shout out to us. Let us know that you're coming or that you've registered, so that we can kind of start looking for the faces and people that we know we'll get to see. So that's for that. Do you guys want to hit the next section?
We have a couple of corrections to make from our previous episode where we talked about the rules. One, I want to personally apologize to all of our listeners and the greater Warcry community, because I was pretty active in my reading of the Gloomspite gets quad ability, and my certainty certainly came through in the podcast. And so the controversy is on the Gloomspite gets quad, which works like Rampage, except you get to add the value of the dice to the damage of hits and critical hits. And what hits and critical hits mean is kind of up for debate. I did a bunch more research after we got some fan responses from the episode, and it's still, I think, unclear. There is a controversy of whether you add that once or for every hit. After reading it all and reading many rules, I've just decided to. I I agree that it's unclear, and I think I first thought that it was very clear, but I agree that it's unclear. And I've decided to play it in a way that was less OP for me. And so only adding that dice once, I feel like it was very, very, very strong when you added that for every attack dice. And for kind of part of my my reading of the rules was like for other abilities where it will say each, and that each means maybe every hit. Well, if it doesn't say each, it doesn't mean that. I would still love further clarity because it still seems like people are fighting on the internet about it, and I certainly was confused. Yeah, my bad on that one, guys. This is like a narrative podcast anyway.
Well, no, I think you touched on it. There's a lot of debate even now, and it wasn't clarified in the facts, so it's so it's still kind of up in the air. But we're doing what we can to figure it out as we go along as a community, right? So
absolutely. And I wanted to thank you, and I apologize I didn't pull up Puda's, the number of people that responded with that in very kind ways. Like there was no anybody raging at us for getting it wrong, but some really good points clarification or just bringing up that it is in question. And so we always want to take as even a stance on anything, but we're going to get things wrong. And we've even with that Paven, I don't think we've ever had a negative experience playing it that way. But yeah, some more clarification would be good. So it was a easy mistake. And then our other one was on the setup of the cards and the resolution order. We've been playing it that we've been doing our setup, and we even joked about this on the last episode, but we've been doing the cards blind and starting with the setup of the terrain, and then we flip over the deployment and we see what that deployment is, and then we flip over the victory and read what that is, and then we flip over the twist and read that. So we've been doing it in kind of a blind order, whereas the rules in the and with that, I think some of it is the quick rules. Say things a little bit different than the rules in the core book, or at least I guess they just simplify it. So sometimes it leaves out some nuance. So in the core book, it says flip them over for all to see. And so if you are playing where you flip them over and you can see all of the different cards and make your choice on your deployment based on what you've read of the victory, that's totally fine. That is fine. Rules as written. And then I think where we would just pose is then still kind of the point we made towards the end of that was if you change that up a little bit in what order you view them or what information you give yourself before making those choices, it can change the battle, right? You may be less likely to get a match or have somebody pick a deployment that so favors them that when you do it blind, that you maybe just keep it a little more random and it's a little bit more casual that way. But as written, to be able to flip them all over, take a look at them, and make your decisions based on that is totally fine.
Yeah.
So
and I want to point out this wasn't it actually having played this way for the last few games. It wasn't the priority roll wasn't as OP as I thought it would be, because you still make a separate roll usually for choosing like attacker, defender, victory conditions, which I think is often like the more important role.
Yeah,
sure.
So there's still like that level of kind of, you don't get to choose it all.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Although, it depends on how you roll. Like, today I got priority. In our second game, I got priority and also one decision. In that case, it hampered you, even though you still had a pretty good game wiping out my models. So.
Yeah, you also making the deployment decision before if you're going to win the victory roll.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
So.
Yep.
It's still a good game. I'll play it more.
Maybe talk about it on a podcast.
All
right.
That's a bit much.
Now that we've flagellated ourselves on the rules that we got wrong, and we will try and do that anytime we get them wrong. So please let us know. You can shoot us email at dogsofwarcry@gmail.com or touch base with us on Twitter at Dogs of Warcry, and let us know if you think we've got something wrong or have a different idea on something, and we'll be happy to research it ourselves and kind of clarify them on future episodes. So please help us out. Keep us honest. Now let's talk about the juicy stuff. Paven, what of the new releases do you want to talk about first?
Oh boy. something we're still waiting for is Tome of Champions. And I believe is it Tome of Champions 2019? Do we for certain? Yeah, so that's, I think, very likely going to be the annual book supporting the game, much like the General's Handbook and Chapter Approved are for Age of Sigmar and Warhammer 40K. And we don't know what's going to be in there. And we're all the community, myself, I'm very excited. I think we have a leaked release date for December 14th, so not too far into the future, and I'm really interested in digging in there. I guess that's all I got to say about it.
Well, and we had talked about that on the cover, what we thought that might be on the cover. Well, we found out that cover monster with the horns is actually an Ogreoid Myrmidon. So one of the new monsters or allies, I think it is, that they talk about in the one of the community articles is a new Ogreoid. The first one was an Ogreoid Thaumaturge in the Silver Tower box game. Mm-hmm. And this is a more fighter version of the Ogreoid. So that's really cool. Kind of a replacement Minotaur or updated Minotaur from the Tzeentchian discipleship kind of thing. And so that was really cool to see that cover monster or face be an actual kind of monster, which could be a very heavily featured monster. And one of the things they said about that was a new leader for your warband. And so I'm some debate on whether or not that's kind of just marketing speak in there, or if that's a rules update or something that's going to change where an ally could become, or if there's going to be more universal leader alternatives for warbands. So that's kind of an interesting. Josh, was there another monster that you took a fancy to from that preview?
Indeed. It was blew my mind when they released these spoiler alerts. And the fun thing was, it was before Blood and Glory. I happened to be on Facebook, and there was this teaser video. They came out accidentally one day early. It must have been up for like 5 minutes, because I managed to snap some pictures and it was gone. So I was able to see them first and shared them. And people actually, thankfully, I took some pictures, or else nobody would have believed me. But one of the other monsters is this Mindsealer Sphyrax, which is really cool. It's got 2 different faces, and it's supposed to have some mind control abilities. And again, it's unclear if it's a monster or an ally, but it has a fairly large base, so it's probably closer to a monster. But that one and the Ogreoid Myrmidon were both alluded to after Blood and Glory, stated to be joining the Fomoroid Crusher in 2020. So sometime next year, we'll get to see these models and get them on our tables.
How funny would it be if the challenge scenario for the Mindsealer Sphyrax wasn't actually a combat board where you had to, but instead you had to answer riddles and tongue twisters.
I love it. Yeah, that would be great.
And that's how you got it on your team. Because you had to respect you, or you had to give it catnip.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But yeah, that's pretty cool. And then on top of that, we got to see the new models for the Spire Tyrants, and we had seen kind of one of them or 2 of them up close, and then we got to see all of them. What was your guys' kind of first impressions of the new Spire Tyrant models?
Well, the first thing I want to say is that if all these new monsters are chaos only, I think that's going to get me to fall to chaos more than anything else. Like the road to damnation is paved with really dope miniatures.
Well put.
But Spire Tyrants got a cool aesthetic. Definitely been hitting the gym. Got a lot of beefy dudes and dudettes. My favorite is certainly the leader, who's a Beastigore, who's got a really, really dope 2-handed mace and I guess a pair of shackles in his hands too. And they're definitely a cool kind of throwback aesthetic to the old Chaos Marauders from, that are still in Age of Sigmar, but definitely that traditional leather, black armor, gold trim, and fierce weapons kind of deal. So yeah, Spire Tyrants are cool.
Yeah, what do you think, Josh?
Yeah, no, I echo a lot of what Paven said there, and it was really exciting to kind of see them add a beastman to a warband. Because right now you can just use one as an ally. So that was a neat twist to see, again, more races being introduced to the warbands that we can get. And I love the kind of Paven had the older Chaos look that they've got, and in the new Varen Spire article that came up this last Friday, they had a little blurb that also mentioned them, just saying, yeah, the Spire Tyrants, bask in the glory of Archaon and everybody else in the arenas, and now they're going out to fight some warbands for fun. So it was kind of fun to have them throw that tidbit in there, because the Spire Tyrants aren't out yet. They get a little bit more flavor on their background, but yeah. I think they'll be a fun warband to see on the table.
Yeah. No, I really appreciated another Chaos Dwarf that's in the mix with a big, huge fuzzy beard, and then Starbuck from the most recent episode of what is it called?
Battlestar Galactica.
Battlestar Galactica, yeah.
Definitely not the most recent reference you can make, but yeah.
Right. I did see some people, making correlations between. I don't know if it's the leader of the warband. It's the guy that's got a bald head with the top knot, yelling up, and the correlation that looks just like Woody Harrelson. It was like, whoa, yeah, you're right. It's very close.
Yeah. So I think a couple of these suffer from the angle that they were photographed at, and could use a little turn, and you'll see kind of more of what they look like. But yeah, I was expecting the first guy we saw. I actually thought that was going to be one of the kind of lower level fighters, but for him to be, so I think I was expecting maybe a higher end. But that Bestigor, like you said, is a pretty ballin'. Kind of leader type or champion type. So there's definitely some flavor here. No, they're pretty cool. And that kind of rounds out reveals that we got to see over the last few months. Why don't we go ahead and take a break? And when we come back, we'll dive into our main topic about starting leagues, our experience with the leagues, and what's coming next. Thanks again for subscribing to Dogs of Warcry. We hope that our love for the Age of Sigmar setting comes through in all of our podcasts that you listen to. Whether it's the Mortal Realms story phase, our Underworlds podcast, What the Hex, or this little gem. If so, consider dropping a tip over at themortalrealms.com/Patreon. Thanks. Welcome back. The victory condition for this episode is to discuss our experiences with our very first league, and now going into our second league, some of the changes that we've made to it, and what ideas we have for the future. To start off with, though, I wanted to talk. We want this to be an encouraging thing for anybody listening who's thinking about starting a league, and one of the big kind of components of Warcry is this league play, is this, having people start a campaign. What were some of your guys' thoughts when we got the book and it was all of these different quests and this idea of individual questing in a group? Josh, what were some of your first thoughts, I guess, new idea?
Mm-hmm. I thought it was a really nice touch, because other campaigns or other sorts of skirmish-based games that I played, it can suffer from not being able to meet up with the right person to continue, your particular mission or your goal. Or if you're playing a map-based campaign, you've got to fight against certain opponents, and sometimes it's the same person over and over and over again. And so I think this was a unique way to solve that, where you could play the same person or a variety of people, but your quests were different. So your goals and your objectives progress differently. And as we've discussed before, I really love the narrative touch of convergences, and that, how it relates to your story and what you get along the way. Your leader grows with artifacts and command traits. And so I thought a league, well, obviously the narrative league is the best way to take advantage of that, as well as, play against a lot of really nice people in a wide variety of different warbands. Definitely enjoyed it.
Paven, had you played in many, campaigns with Age of Sigmar or other systems? You talked before about, playing some War Mahords or, some other things. How was this system different from, playing kind of out of the gate? How was it different from ways you've experienced it in the past?
Oh, it's an interesting question, Eric. So one system that they think about is I played in I think I mentioned this before, I got my butt kicked in the Fire Scar Plateau when I just got back in Age of Sigmar, just up and down that whole thing. And that felt kind of very snowball-y. And but it was a super fun league. It was great. I was like, I rebased all of my orcs and goblins from fantasy during that league. So that was a great project. This league, I mean, the quest put a very interesting spin. It's like everybody has their own thing to do, and there's not, like, usually in campaigns, there's like an obvious winner that gets out ahead, and then everybody else loses. But with the quest system, everybody can, like, win in their own mind and, like, achieve their own goals, but also have, like, everybody can be progressing at the same time. Like, unless you're at a convergence, everybody moves along the tracker, win or loss. And so that's like I think that's a very positive experience to build into a system.
One of the things that as we started playing it, realized that there's a lot of rewards for just playing, and not just like, participation trophies, but things to accomplish, things to try for, and ways to kind of stretch the kind of games you play, by playing against different opponents, by playing against in different scenarios, and obviously the battle cards help a lot with that. But it is definitely really interesting that it gave you this personal goal or something for your warband to accomplish, while other warbands are trying to accomplish other things, which is very themely. Like, instead of everyone trying to accomplish the same thing and only one person gets it, everyone has a chance at their own kind of legend, right? Growing their name. Some of the reasons, when starting the league, obviously we'd all kind of were interested in playing this game and trying to figure out ways to get together and play. And pretty quickly after, or as Warcry was coming out, our local Warhammer store manager, Vint, had talked to me about getting a league started. Now, I had never run a league before. Since starting the Mortal Realms podcasts and, doing a number of things, we've talked about, having done some local, some things to try and encourage and support local play, but also being pretty busy with family and work. Sometimes it's been easier to focus outside of, to the online community. But this really felt like an opportunity to, I guess, do something different and work locally. And I think probably the number one, aside from, I guess, number one was obviously when you've got a game you're excited for, you want to play it. And so one really big reason to jump into doing a league was to try and find more people that wanted to play this, so I'd have more opponents. So there's some that personal, like, selfish reasons. But then in general, I think the biggest reason was to just start building more community locally around, using this new game as kind of that excitement generated from a new game, all the marketing that the Games Workshop was doing to promote the Warcry, the kind of that initial, I guess anything new generates quite a bit of interest from the overall player base. Mm-hmm. And so that's a really good time and a good point to jump into your local community and try a league and to start something off and see who gravitates towards that, and share some experiences. And so I thought initially it was really cool for Vint, of all the stores in our area. Vint was probably the most, some of that's his job, but all stores could benefit from having leagues running. But it was kind of on him to say, hey, I need to do this, and who can help me? And so that was kind of the impetus of it, was first being asked by a store, and then wanting to build community locally. So, Pavind, what were some of the benefits that you guys felt brought to either our store or our community from having a league?
Well, it was the friends I made along the way.
That old gem.
Yeah. In all seriousness, it was a great entry point for, I think, a few people into the community. Now, there were certainly some old faces that are involved in a lot of stuff, and it was great to have an opportunity to play against those players again. But there were some new people that were coming in just to check out Warcry or check out the Madison Seed, and it was very easy to get them games in and not feel like they had missed a step, I don't think. Another thing that's just great for me and league nights is like just having a game night the same night of every week. It just makes family planning and coordinating with the wife much easier. If I'm just like, all right, Thursdays is Warcry night, stick it on the calendar.
Totally agree with that. And it's definitely, it's also, I think, extremely motivating from a hobby perspective because, like, okay, I know Thursday night I've got some games. I'm looking forward to that. I need to work on my warband, or I got to get some things working up. But yeah, I think one of the, I was surprised at how many people we had come out, and a wide variety of new players that I had never played against before, which was a lot of fun. And getting a chance to play against like you and Paven, who I hadn't played games against in a long time. Was a blast. Yeah, and kind of getting a new setting and picking up old hobby grudges and then continuing those rivalries and then developing new ones and developing stories. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that's been my favorite part about Warcry, but facilitated by the league, is having enough games to start developing kind of a familiarity with the warband that I'm playing and feeling like I'm more in tune with it and better capable with it. But most importantly, I think having that regular day where I know I'm going to get together with friends who weren't friends immediately, like we're all just getting to know each other, but it felt like we all became, grew with a lot of friendships pretty quickly because we were all spending that Thursday time together and people coming and going and playing one game or two games, whatever that be, and telling those stories together and having those rivalries. Exactly that. I'm still hoping to win a game against Aaron and his bone splitters. Yeah, I mean, I think that's by far the best reason to try and start a league is you're certainly going to build some friendships and you're going to play more games, tell more stories, and hopefully grow the community and get some interest. So let's talk about that a little bit. When I started the league, obviously I hadn't done one of these before, and there's a few things that I'm learning along the way, and we'll talk about that when it comes to the event as well. But obviously the Warhammer store has a bit of traffic, and you're guaranteed that some of those people are going to be interested in the new Games Workshop stuff that's coming out. And so Vint does a good job of, recruiting some people to help him run events or run, game nights. And was looking and does some promotion and talking to people. And so everyone who's coming through there is getting to know about it. So that was really cool. But then it was a lot of work on Facebook to kind of get people signed up to say they're going to be coming out, to talk to them about stuff, taking pictures of the day of people there, which is hard to remember when you want to play games and just roll dice. And kind of keeping everybody on their toes or informed or top of mind about what's going on the next week, that we're meeting again, we're going to be there, here's some pictures, that sort of thing. So that was something that I think I knew was going to be a part of it, which is probably why I hadn't done as much of it in the past. But to run a league and have regular showing, you do have to do quite a bit of talking about it and communicating, and kind of the glue of doing a league is the time you spend in between talking it up, sharing things, etc.
I played in a variety of different leagues, all sorts of formats, map-based leagues, campaigns for 40K or Warhammer Fantasy, some old map-based campaigns and more time. And I think, yeah, you're definitely right that, and sometimes it's just the inherent group and the individuals within it, which are really good at contributing narratively. If you're all telling stories together, then it becomes kind of a self-perpetuation machine where it just continues to go by itself because everybody is building that story together and you're kind of getting things going. But when it's a larger group like we had for this particular league, there's a lot of different people, and some stay for one game, some stay for a couple, some are willing to meet other days. So you don't quite have that same mechanic, and so you do end up having to spend more time motivating people, either just communicating or saying, hey, we had this many players come out, how's everybody doing, and then kind of promoting it the next time to try and remind people to build it into their schedules. And I think you did a good job of doing that, and it was on people's calendars, and it kept the league kind of growing and at a at least stable levels throughout the entire league, which can be difficult to do. So
Yeah. Paven, having that kind of 1 day a week when you're playing, how did you navigate that with your family? To kind of, that wasn't something you were doing before that, I don't believe. Did you have a game night that you were kind of heading out once a week prior to this, or?
No, it was closer to like once a month. I would just try to make sure to get a game in. So this is definitely up to my games played for sure. Yeah, no, it's like I put it on my we coordinate everything in my house through Google Calendars, and so I just put it on my Google Calendar. Warcry night is Thursday, and I think for my wife and the kids, I'll get pizza on Thursdays.
nice.
So I missed out on pizza, which is a bummer, but
Yeah. Felt like the biggest thing with running the league and trying to kind of rally people around 1 day a week. And one of the good things about having it every Thursday was trying to build consistency, trying to kind of convey the idea that there was a group of people playing Warcry every Thursday night at this location and that it was fun. And there was never a point where it wasn't fun. There were certainly a couple of nights where, a handful of people showed up instead of, our first night. Again, Warcry had just launched and there was a lot of curiosity around it. Our first night of League was 16 people.
Mm-hmm.
And we were all surprised by that and taken back. And I never once thought we were going to get 16 people every night or anything like that. But I would say, quite a few of our Thursday nights were, 5 games going on, 6 games going on with, 8 to 10 people. We had a few of those bigger nights. And so I think that came out of first, having a good game that people really enjoyed playing, having that consistency so they knew there was something going on. But then I think the next piece, once you have that consistency, once you have that, the store support and you're out every night and you have, eventually, I wasn't going to be able to make every night. And, Josh, you showed a great interest in and help in, kind of getting out for that every night and, bringing terrain, bringing, stuff for people to play on and bringing a warband, etc. I think the next most important thing is kind of the attitude or tone you set for your Thursday night. And I know that in general, I think most of the game shops I'm able to get to have a great group of people that are playing games and having fun, have a really good attitude. But I think in a league, especially at a store where you're constantly going to be having new people coming in, you have to have a very welcoming, kind of hard on your sleeve kind of welcoming environment for people to come in and play. And that was one of the things where I wasn't sure of because I didn't know everybody yet, is how easily would it be for somebody to come in and play and get a game and it be a good first experience. And, I, with AOS, Age of Sigmar, I ran a lot of demo games early on. And, that can be fun to run a lot of demo games, but you don't want to run all demo games. And so having some other people, Josh, having you there to be able to play some games. And then, it was pretty quick. I knew that Paven was a fun person to play against and easygoing, and that a new player was going to have a good experience there. But I can't think of any of our players, that had experience and who were interested. Aaron was another who was super into the game right off the bat, had been reading the rules and came in very knowledgeable, but was also super capable of running really good, first games. I can't think of anybody in our league who was not fun to play against. And
They're all really nice people. Yeah.
That was a huge boon to creating that good experience, welcoming experience. And it's probable that they're just all good people anyway, but we were very intentional about setting a really open tone to the league that anybody was welcome, any skill level, any, coming from any background, and wanting any kind of experience, that we would try and provide that. The biggest compliment came from one of our newer attendees, and that was Ben. And he was traveled around, been a few different places, or lived in a few different places. And, his comment was something to the effect of that he hadn't met a more welcoming group of gamers in the many places he'd moved to. And so I think very much, absolutely 100% that welcoming energy that we brought contributed to more success for the league than we would have had without it.
Yeah, definitely.
Pavend, how did you change for the event? Like, the event inspired you to not be a real jerk and instead be a nice guy to the new players and other people. What was it about the league that inspired you to turn over that new leaf?
The fear of being shamed on a podcast, probably.
No, I'm just kidding. No, I knew right away that you were going to be down because we'd played some games at some of our game nights and stuff like that, and you were highly narrative and driven to have good games and not wins necessarily. So, Pavend, was there anything that you were doing to make sure that kind of contributing to that environment?
I mean, I was just trying to make sure not to get too competitive, especially with new players and new games. Like, really try not to you make sure I'm keeping my eye on the ball with if you lose, you still have a good time, and don't just try to ultra focus on the rules. Except when I play Josh, then it's all about winning. But one thing that I didn't do, but I certainly think about now is if it's somebody's first game of Warcry, or they're just coming fresh to the league, is not bringing my super squad to that game. It just didn't. The couple times it happened, it just didn't feel that great. And so right now I always pack 2 warbands that I'm interested in playing. And then so I always have a warband that I can play at 1,000 points in advance, but it doesn't feel like I'm bringing the whole heat of the Squig squad to them.
Yeah, that's definitely. Yeah, I think some of the other things I thought we did well is we tried to set one day where everybody could get together and motivate people to come and play that night, but we also said we understand people have a busy life. If you can't make Thursday night, then we created a Facebook Messenger group with everybody in it so that you could coordinate, share information on, your sheets and, how many glory points you had, etc. But also to coordinate, hey, I couldn't make it on, Thursday. Can somebody play Saturday or Sunday or whatnot? So people could still get their games in, still progress their quests. And those who were super excited, like I was when I wanted to keep playing games, I could go and say, yeah, I'd be happy to come and help you get your game in. And I think that flexibility is really important because we know, some people can't make that night, and that's why, but having that flexibility encouraged a lot of people. And I think just being open, like Pavend was saying, be flexible with your lists and, having fun while you're playing and not just trying to win because you're advancing in your quest regardless. I think that is critical to encouraging people to have a more casual environment.
Yeah, I think it needs to be everybody's goal that's participating that a win is that somebody comes back and plays again. And that doesn't mean throwing a game. That doesn't mean letting somebody win necessarily. Although I will, like you say, I will get casual enough where I'm sharing with them what they could do to beat me, right? And trying to make it a learning experience and not something that I'm trying to get some ego boost on. And so that I think that's being very intentional and, like I said, hard on your sleeve about it. One of the other things, I'm terrible at names. And so I made a point of learning everybody's name so that I could call them by their name and recognize them. And that actually helped me, get to know them, think about them outside of that time. And I think even in our messenger chat, I think somebody came up with, changing each other's actual names or Facebook names to their warband names.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so that helped us identify each other.
Yeah.
Helped us identify each other with the warbands we played, etc. And so there was a lot of that, a bit of that kind of stuff. Some of the things that were, like you said, we had 16 people sign up for the league, and we had a few people that didn't show up, played one game and didn't come out more after that. We had some other people kind of pop in for one game here or there partway through. And I think we ended up, after about, we did start seeing a drop off after the first conversion. We had 100% of our players get through. Well, 100%, that seems weird. 100% get through the second game. And then the first convergence, we had 63% play their first convergence or win their first convergence and move on. And so that was interesting. Obviously, it's some sort of challenge, but I think it was just super interesting to kind of see where, as you get down, we played 8 weeks, and there's generally, 10, 11 battles in a roster, in a quest. And within that first 8 weeks, depending on how many people how often they could play, etc., most people were able to get their, through their first 5 or kind of halfway through their quest. And that was, kind of, some people, obviously, if you don't get through your convergence on the first time, you play again, or you might, hit that spot and you might play a different game or help somebody with their convergence, so you're not playing your own, etc. So I didn't record the number of games everybody played, but getting about halfway through their quest, about half of the people got through half the quest or got beyond half the quest. So, that was an interesting kind of thing to see and how people got through it. Some interesting things when people came into the league. We had 75% of the players picking a new warband and doing something new to get started. And about half of the warbands were chaos warbands. And so that was also interesting in terms of what people's choices were. And one of the things, obviously, I think helped a lot with the league was having those non-chaos warbands to choose from to let people get in and play something they may have already had. But even then still saw, a lot of new warbands formed out of that. And then, there's just a ton of new friends that we have. People, I would say half of the people that came out and played, I had never met before. Mm-hmm. And so it's just cool getting to meet that other side of our community that, is probably playing the game in some other store in their garage or doing something like that. But now they're out here with us and some of them are coming to events and we're doing more things together. We're playing with them outside of our Thursday nights, etc. Let's move on then to talk about kind of the mechanics of running a league. The core rule book has, the guidelines for running individual quests for everybody kind of taking up their own mantle and moving forward with it. But it doesn't give a lot of guidance and to kind of putting structure around that for a league. And the GW does provide these league boxes that you can get through your local friendly game store to run a league in those in their store. So the store can order that, and it has some things. It has a gold, silver, and bronze medal. It has some acrylic game pieces. In the first box, it was the objective tokens. In this latest box, it is wound tokens. And so it has some things like that. In the latest one, it also has some cards. So it has some swag, some things to give away, and some things that could be earned. There's not a lot of rules for how you kind of keep people accountable, how you kind of keep them in it, or how you connect everybody's the individual quests that they're playing. How do you bring those together and make it feel like there is a connective tissue for the group? And so without that, we're kind of looking for it and trying to answer that question. What do we do with this? And there were some mechanics of the game, things like that, where we weren't sure how those were going to play out because we hadn't played that many games, etc. Josh, what was one of the, do you remember what one of the bigger kind of rules or mechanics that you thought we needed to put in place to make league play or campaign play fun for everybody?
Just based on experiences from running, our Necromunda leagues or Mordheim, and do we put caps on how many games you play per week? Because will a warband advance more quickly, and the number of artifacts and command traits, and does that become overwhelming or too powerful? And we also talked about the terrain, what the terrain rules were, because they were fairly vague, and they clarified that a bit in the FAQ, which helped. But at the time, it was, can we shoot through these grates? If you do you get cover? How does that work? So you get line of sight. Could you use spells? So there was, some of those things we weren't sure if we should put some rules in place for the terrain features, or just wait and see if it actually became an issue or not, because we didn't have a lot of ranged attacks to begin with. So those are a few that I can think of that stuck in my mind.
So let's break those down a little bit. Let's talk about let's get the one about shooting or hitting through grates. How much did you get people asking about that or complaining about that?
Yeah, I never heard anybody ask. Well, no, there were a couple of people who had asked, can you do that? And we just said, yes, you can. And at that time, you didn't have a cover save. Although I think most people kind of included that just because in other skirmish type games you would get cover. I think, the question came up more often is, if you're within an inch of that, can you attack through it? And then there was a lot of debate on the internet. Oh yeah, you could use spears, but not a sword. Well, you can't separate those two in the game itself because they're not split up that way. But I don't think we had that come up. I think in most cases people attacked through a doorway if there was one there. There wasn't really a whole lot in terms of attacking through walls or grates that ever came up. So it became a non-issue, I think, in a lot of cases. And then the FAQ released the terrain clarifications, which helps, I think, solve a lot of that potential issue.
Yeah. I think, the concern was how often was that going to happen, and would it, break the immersiveness of the game to be able to attack through there. And some people had an explanation for it narratively. Some people couldn't get past it narratively. In the end, we decided, overall, we decided to run most of the rules as written and very vanilla, not changing many things. But this was one where we weren't sure. We played it as is, and it didn't really come up much. We didn't have anybody feel like they're losing games or getting frustrated over it or anything like that. I just never heard about it. So I think, and I think that you get cover if you're the receiving end of that, makes total sense. Or in general, if you're on the other side of it, but then, the big one I think that we talked about was how do you limit the number of games people play? And in the end, Josh, you were able to get the most games in because you were the most excited. But also, it was fantastic to be able to give people a place, somebody who is willing to play games or meet someplace for games. So getting in the most games, did you feel like that was as impactful on your results?
I think we kind of talked about this before. I think it's a mixture of things. I think that because, it was our first league, so just because I had gotten so many games in, I was also a lot more experienced with my warband and better able to take advantage of the Destiny levels and artifacts and things that I had. So I think in some cases, as Paven touched on, it kind of felt like, oh wow, this mission is super easy for me against this particular opponent because I had a lot of points and I had a lot of Destiny levels and really good artifacts. And so I think it could come into play. I think it's probably not an issue overall because I think in general most people are going to get maybe a couple games in a week, maybe 3, but you're going to win some, you're going to lose some. And I think as long as people are staying active and all playing together, everybody will kind of evolve at the same rate. I think it becomes a little more challenging when you have new people come in, and then you have people who've been around for maybe 6 weeks playing, and their warbands are highly evolved, and you have new players coming in and they're no experience whatsoever. And I think those are the circumstances where we kind of thought about changes we could incorporate in the second league, but also I think circumstances where I started to bring a warband to help play against new players that wasn't my own, like Paven had said, just to give those people a more equal experience because it can have an impact on play. It can feel different.
Paven, you also got quite a few games in. How impactful do you think it was to be able to get more games in on kind of how you progress through the campaign or through your quest, or how you matched up versus other players in the league?
Well, I think the games you play are super important because that's like the whole thing. Because it's how you advance on your quest, it's how you get your warband better, it's how you get better at the game, especially in this when we're, because so far down the learning curve. But one of the best things I think about like Warcry leagues and the way they've set it up is how little things you actually have to do. Because like everybody's just on their own adventure and you don't necessarily need to keep parity with everybody. It's like a asymmetrical game anyway. We're not running a like kind of match play league, so everybody's going to be at a little different place, and we don't really have to make, you don't have to do a lot of coordination over the top to make things run smoothly. People can show up and things work great.
Yeah. I think the thing that you hit on the nail on the head, Josh, was that playing more games gave you more experience, which certainly I think contributed to you earning more glory in those games, and advancing your territories and having more points on the table. And at the end of the day, if you're playing somebody with 1,000 points, at the top end you have 1,300 versus their 1,000, which is generally two big models additionally, or a handful of smaller models and more activations, which can definitely change the balance of the game, or in terms of that you're bringing different things. That being said, most of the games you play, you're just advancing your time, or your progress, right? Win or lose. I tend to think that the thing that affects the game the most is the victory condition and the warband that may have an advantage this way or that way. But like you said, the other thing is that we're not in a competitive space, and we can promote kind of that use of use a different warband, or be a little bit more casual, or the thing that worried me about the idea of limiting how much somebody could play had to do with, one, kind of, if somebody's just really jazzed about the game, wanting to give them, the room to play. But I think, for instance, Josh, you were available for a lot of other people's convergences and, other things. So like when you can play more games, you're often helping other people out with their games, right?
Right. Yep.
And so there's an aspect, and especially as we get into challenges, monster battles, etc., where like we get together on a Thursday and your game might be playing a monster versus somebody else, and you're not progressing your own warband. So I think, there are some trade-offs for being able to play more games and that sort of stuff. And I think that was more apparent as creating those gaps as a first league. And now as we have a new league and more people have played the game more and learned more, I think that experience gap changes, and the number of games you play is going to become less impactful.
Yeah. No, and just to add to that is, one of the reasons I played so many games is because I was excited, and as the narrative aspect of this is so much fun, is you want to see your warband grow and develop and complete that quest, and try to start the next one. So it was definitely nice to be able to do that. And I'm not suggesting that people do limit it. I think, just because it was the first league, I felt there were some challenges if there was a more experienced warband and people who weren't as experienced. But I definitely think that we've accounted for that a little bit in the second league, and I don't think that's as the community grows, that's less of an issue, and everybody is more experienced and willing to teach new players, which is a huge benefit to allowing people to play more games.
Yep. And I think there's always going to be an exception to like changing how you play for a new player.
Right. Definitely.
Yeah.
In any game.
Game. But what were some of the other mechanics that we were worried about? Obviously, we got a few. We were learning as we were doing it and trying to figure out how some things worked, like cover saves and that sort of thing. Were there any mechanics that came up a lot in terms of kind of questions about how it played?
One that came to mind was falling and how that works. Because sometimes it's with a critical hit, or sometimes it's when you're jumping and you're landing, or sometimes when it's when you're climbing and you fall, and when does your opponent get to move you versus you get to move yourself. That came up a few times, just kind of explain what that order was and when it happened, and but once people got it, it was pretty smooth.
Yeah. Paven, were there any rules questions that seemed to come up a lot with new players in your games?
Yeah, it was like often it'd be like, dang, that Gloomspite gets quad is good. I'm like, yeah, another way to read this rule.
There's only one way.
Sorry.
It's still good.
Yeah. I do think, with anything new, the thing that you've always got to temper a little bit is people are always going to be surprised by things. Mm-hmm. Like everything's a surprise at first. And that's part of what we love about a new game, right? Is that everything's new. But that can also be hard when you do have this game has these high highs, right? Where, you can have a model that you from your planesrunner who can roll 3 dice and whiff and do no damage to your leader who can be buffed up and do 24 damage. There's spikes and there's a lot of new warbands and we're not playing all the warbands. And so sometimes things on paper look scarier than they are in real life. Some things on paper look less scary until you actually receive it. And, even that swing between a quad that relies on the dice number, between getting a quad that's a 2 and a quad that's a 6, the impact of that is different, right? And so I think that was probably the thing that I personally had to kind of temper in my own head, but also temper in others, is that kind of that knee-jerk reaction to want to label something broken or want to label something overpowered because you're seeing it in action there, but you haven't seen your own thing in action yet, right? I didn't know that if I could get a quad 6 and put that on my leader or my dogs, that giving them +3 attacks and +3 strength would just make them beasts. I didn't know how big of an impact that was going to have on games when I saw it. At first I was like, I don't know when that's going to come into play. Would I rather have a quad or a triple or whatever? So things like that so we, you don't know all your rules. You don't know all their rules. And so getting surprised by things was something that's really good to temper and kind of set some expectations on. Mm-hmm. What was the biggest surprise for you, Paven, in terms of, besides the Gloomspite quad, what was the biggest surprise for you, playing games and matching up against different warbands?
Good question. Biggest surprise, like game wise. Like I never knew what anybody's warbands did, and I still mostly don't know. I guess like how important. But some of the wisdom I've gained is like how important movement and just number of activations is, and how important just getting bodies on the floor can like affect the outcome.
Yeah.
That's probably something that I didn't quite realize just reading the rules.
I think that was definitely one of the bigger surprises I learned throughout the league, is how important, number of models and or activations could be. And specifically, certain missions, it's a huge, bonus to have more models or more activations. And I think some of the surprises I had were cases where you knew you were facing against a tough opponent, but when you drew the cards for the mission, it totally changes the dynamic. It's like, oh, I've got this deployment and this is the victory, and here's the twist. Oh, wow, this twist just helped me a whole lot. Now this opponent is less scary. So I thought it was really interesting how again, just the randomness of the cards can really change the dynamic of the game and the dynamic of the warbands. And it goes both ways. Sometimes it makes it really easy for you, and other times it makes it less hard. So, but I appreciated that dynamic because it made it more interesting and a little bit more fun. There are games where, like we talked about, where I played Paven for his final convergence and I played you for your final convergence. And there was a difference of 250 to 300 points, but I still felt like I had a chance to thwart you, to beat you, based on the mission and the twists and everything else. And I think that's important because you still feel engaged, even though you may feel like it's going to be hard or a tough warband or a tough game or whatever.
Yeah. No, I think the biggest surprise for me was that there's that spectrum similar to what we talked about in terms of the effectiveness of a quad or the highs and lows of a warband's capabilities, was that there were certainly some players where they'd play a game and turn one it was decided, the victory was achieved, and that being a very fast thing and sometimes can feel bad for the person who lost, but at the same time there were very difficult convergences where even knowing everything ahead of time and having time to think about it or plan, it's still, depending on your matchup or depending on where your deployment ended up being, it can be a really hard to achieve. Josh, I had however many more points. To have 200 more points than you, or 250 more points. But my win condition, picking a square and making sure you have 0 models in it by the end of the game, versus your win condition, which is just having one model survive in each quadrant by the end of the game. Whether that can be hard or easy depending on your warband or whatever. Like, I'm obviously finding that to be a much harder task for me in this, and so, but that makes that challenging. It makes it unexpected. You don't know which one's going to be easy. You don't know which one's going to be hard. And so that was a surprise to me in terms of, not surprising that it would have some imbalances, but just the starkness of those, but how much they also add to the character of this game. So, which is also why I think we lean so heavily towards the blind fulfillment of the cards, because it's kind of like, hey, well, let's just see what happens next. And it's kind of cool that way. And maybe that some of that changes as people get to make more strategic decisions about, where the deployment is compared to based on the victory, et cetera. But, so those are some of the mechanics kind of going into it that we were worried about. Partway through, I think one of the big ones that we were most worried about was people getting through their first convergence. And as we noted, not everybody got through their first convergence and completed that. And so that was certainly for certain warbands or certain players, getting through that their particular warband's quest first convergence was hard. And we did see one player change up their warband completely because they'd gone up against it a couple of times and just in general weren't seeing that, whether that be so they were playing Iron Jaws, and whether that be that Iron Jaws have a uphill battle being so few models and activations, or just not fitting the play style he wants to play. He ended up going to the Splintered Fang, which has a different vibe altogether. And wanting to play something else that he was more interested in. Some of those things were questions that about halfway through we were like, well, what do we do if somebody's feeling a little frustrated about that, not getting through their convergences? Were there any kind of, obviously you guys don't have any issue totally clubbing baby seals and stealing convergences from people who are the right winners of those. What were some of your feelings about those sorts of things, like that the convergence being kind of a thing that you had to earn, the double-edged sword of that? Paven, did you run into any situations where either you couldn't do your convergence or somebody else was kept from theirs, where it felt like it was it felt bad or didn't ring the way you wanted it to?
Yeah, this is something I think I've talked about before, that it just feels a little bit like the fun police when you're, preventing somebody from doing their first, any of their convergences, but especially their first one, where they're just like getting going. Yep. And you're just like, shutting their dreams down. I think, yeah, it does feel better, I believe, to earn them, and I don't think you should just get them for showing up necessarily. But when it's somebody's like second, third, or more attempt, then it feels less fun or less good. So yeah, that's my personally, I think I always passed my convergences, but I'm just
la-di-da. Very cool. Yeah. So I mean, those were a number of the things going into it and partway through that we were kind of worried about or thinking about. When we did end up doing kind of a poll afterwards, we did a little bit of a kind of a feedback Google poll, etc. And if anybody's interested, they can write us. I can share what we put together for a poll. We ended up getting, I think, 5 responses again out of the 16. And I'm sure it was, mostly the two of you complaining about, how bad a job I did. But in general, we had a high positivity. Again, kind of the experience in the league was high. It was out of 10, it was 8s, 9s, and 10s. So nobody was feeling poor. Out of likely to participate again, we had all 5s. So those are sorts of things. But there was a couple of things that kind of, if there's anything which impacted your experience, which you'd like to see changed, how progressing the quest was one of them. Was a number that 2 of them came up with, is kind of getting past that convergence. One of the questions was, or the idea was, some kind of mercy rule for convergences. So it was something that, again, this is probably one of the newest things that Warcry brings. So there's some getting used to it. And I think that there's some benefit from setting better expectations for the players on what the convergences mean and that sort of thing. But overall, that was probably one of the things that we got feedback on the most, was what do we do about that? And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Was there anything else that stood out to you guys about our first league that you'd want to talk about or want to bring up?
League was a great experience. It was super fun. It felt like I don't think I'd be as nearly as excited or invested in Warcry the game or my warband if it wasn't for the league and the consistent league night, and to be able to achieve my goblin dreams. I guess so. If there's anybody that's thinking about running a Warcry league, I bet it. Having not run this one, and I'm not running the next one, but I bet you could get away with running a league without a lot of overhead and effort. Mm-hmm. Just show up consistently, do some recruiting, but there's not going to be a lot of, I don't know, spreadsheet keeping up to date.
If you don't want to.
Yeah, if you want to get a spreadsheet for everything, that's fine. So yeah, it was great. Do it. It was super fun.
Yeah. Josh, was there anything else that stood out?
Some of the things I think that were nice is, whenever you'd play against Paven or somebody else who had a convergence, so some of us would ask them to read, okay, so what is this convergence? Read us the narrative aspect that's in the book. What are you trying to do? And then, what happened at the success? If they succeeded, what does it tell you happened? To try and draw some more of that narrative flavor into the game and make it more interesting, I thought was a lot of fun. I think having little motivating tidbits along the way was helpful to have. Having those tokens to hand out and saying, oh, whoever's got the most glory in the first half will get some tokens, first top 3 or something like that. And then we made sure, that whoever got tokens the first half didn't get tokens the second half. But then you added the narrative flavor of, okay, we're going to hand out these medals, but it's going to be for best painted warband, and we're just going to have it sit there for a week, and people are going to come to the store and then vote for what they think. So I think having those sorts of, rewarding aspects along the way for hobby progress. Yes, we had some for rewarding good gameplay. We had some rewarding good hobby efforts. And I think having a mix of that is motivating for people to show up and also to continue working on their war bands or pick up a new one and keep the excitement level going.
Yeah. For bookkeeping, I guess, because I hadn't done this before, I basically asked people to take a picture of their roster at the end of the week. So if they played Thursday and they weren't going to get any more games, then they could take a picture and send it to our Facebook Messenger, or I could take a picture of it then, or I'd give them until Wednesday before the day before our event to post those up. And then what I would do is I would simply keep track of, I had tracking or a spreadsheet of who was in the league and who wasn't, basically. A couple of these stats I kind of wanted to see who did chaos, who did something new. And then I just was trying to keep track of which point in their quest they were on for kind of just a progress, not how many games they played or anything like that. And then I'd look at kind of how much glory they would have, or the number of territories and how much glory that they had that wasn't spent on artifacts or mustering more forces in a game. So there wasn't a ton to track. It was fun to track some of those things. Yeah, I'm not a spreadsheet person, but if you are, you might be able to get a few more things out of that. So we're going to take a break now, and when we come back, we're going to talk about starting up the second league and things that we've changed and ideas that we have for experimenting, and we'll share those in just a minute. So you like podcasts about miniature games, huh? If you want to dive deep into the Age of Sigmar lore through Black Library novels and Army battle tomes, check out the Mortal Realms podcast hosted by Aaron, Davey, Paul, and myself. And if you're into the miniatures and deck building game Underworlds, spend an activation on What the Hex, where Davey, Phil, and other guests talk casually about improving your fun and gameplay. Alright, enough of this not Warcry stuff. Welcome back. We're going to jump right into kind of how we've kicked off our second league, and we're running for kind of another 8 weeks, but we're kind of in the holiday season. We know that we wanted to roll out some monsters and mercenaries. We wanted to experiment with some rules and some changes to kind of help the experience. We wanted to balance, some not doing too many changes. And again, these changes are more focused on kind of our league and our group having fun and encouraging play, etc. So there's two parts to this. One part is kind of rules changes or adjustments that we made, and these are all experiments. So we did give these to our players as the expectation we've set is that we're going to try these, but we could change them at the end of this league. And so in that regard, people have been very open to them. It doesn't feel like we're saying, hey, if you're in this league, you play this way. Our league has really kind of created that atmosphere of we're willing to try some things, and that's been really cool. And then the other part is kind of our league rules, things we've added on to kind of add some flavor, add some interest, make some things that are achievable beyond or not just thinking about your quest. So let's start with the rules. Why don't we take some turns, and you can go ahead and pick one of the rules that we've changed, and you can introduce what that change is if you're familiar enough, if you're comfortable enough, and then we can talk a little bit about the reasoning behind it. Does that sound like a good plan of action, Josh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, then why don't I let you go first and pick one of these kind of rules changes, adjustments, and what it was and what did we change it to?
Definitely. So one of the rules that I thought would be a nice addition to kind of counter cases where people had more experienced warbands that are more developed play against younger or newer warbands is to introduce kind of this underdog rule. In a campaign that Eric and I had played in for Necromunda, there's a nice underdog mechanic which rewards somebody for playing somebody that's potentially more challenging. So for this particular league, we decided the best way to do that, and we had some feedback from Paul and Paven on all the rules that we kind of introduced, is we decided that, okay, if your opponent has more dominated territories than you, then during the Aftermath sequence, you get one additional glory point per 100 points round to the nearest hundredth in warband size for playing the game. And then that way, even if they've got 1,300 points and you've got 1,000, if you tried your best but you couldn't win because they were too strong, the mission was against you, you still got 3 extra glory points for that 300-point difference. So you still feel like, okay, even if I lost, I still got a lot of glory because I just played the game, and I get 3 bonus. I have 4 glory points right off the bat. So I think it was a nice way to reward people for even trying those challenging games.
Yeah. And it kind of plays off of the rule that lets you spend more to put more on the table. Mm-hmm. So that in the end, it is a way for, if somebody doesn't want to spend glory to kind of try and add 100 points to try and get closer to their opponent who has more territory, you could do that. But also, if the person who has the more territory and has the ability to put more points on the table, they could decide to just put 1,000 points on the table to match their opponent, and then they don't get that extra glory, right? But they've also created a more balanced game.
In what situation would you want your opponent just to have less glory at the end?
I think there's it's more prizes, right? If you're like, I really want those acrylic tokens, I gotta make sure I got enough glory. Yeah. So.
Yeah. I mean, it felt.
Right, if you really want the tokens, I will just give you the tokens.
That was just an example.
Well, I'll say that losing my last convergence and also giving Josh 3+ glory on top of him winning the convergence or winning the victory, I would have. It's a gamble, right? Like I'm bringing in my full amount, but if I have a high risk of not pulling it out, then that's a 5 for victory, 6, 7, 8. So I mean, he's going ahead really 9. Fast. Yeah, that's before all the other warbands taken out, etc. But so it's I guess it's more of that resource play, and more so against your opponents that you can be more competitive against than somebody else. But yeah, I mean, it's too, if it just might give you that incentive to pull your punch a little bit and how many models you put on the table.
Sure. I don't quite buy that trade-off, but I do feel like this rule feels really good in that, like, it's nice to have, like, oh no, like I'm going into an uphill battle, I already know it, but like, but I got this upside. And so that has a good play feel. And also, just getting more glory for going up against a harder opponent just sounds right and like feels right from a narrative perspective. Like you're going to take on the big dog in town. You get that extra rep.
Yeah, definitely.
Paven, do you have one that you liked or wanted to talk about?
The falling rule, the house rule there, where you do for every 3 inches you fall, you roll an additional die 6. With the same kind of impact damage rule. On a 4 up you take 1, but on a 6 you take 3. So if you fall from 9 inches, you could take as much as 9. I think that feels right. It makes more sense because we do have Eric. You specifically have a lot of terrain that is very tall, and it feels like you should just be taking more than 1 damage from falling off of all that. So that feels really good. It doesn't really impact our games on average very much unless we're using those very specific tables.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but that's a cool one. That's a cool house rule that I feel like adds to the narrative, but doesn't like make the game like more confusing to play.
Yeah, very cool. I'm glad you like that one. I will pick we added this one kind of last. We realize that consumable artifacts don't get used that much. For what they do, they currently, as rules is written, take an action to use. So usually it's something you imbibe or smash or something like that, and so it takes an action to use it. But often, almost always, I wish that I had one more action to use with it. So if I want to, for instance, there's the bubbles of smoke or ulgu something, and so you take an action to smash it, and then it gives you fly. Well, if I'm trying to get away from something, so it's great if you want to just hop over a terrain piece and get to the other side of it. But usually they can chase you pretty easily after that. Or if you get to that other side, you can't do anything once you get there. So I rarely use it. If I'm trying to escape someplace, I can usually get there faster by climbing and jumping, or, doing 2 moves, I guess, so things like that where I feel like it doesn't always get used. And so I end up with a lot of artifacts that are the consumable ones specifically that don't get used. So we're experimenting with the ability to use consumables as an ability or as an action. So giving you still have your ability to use it as an action. So you can use it as your first action or second action. So then you can still use an ability, that activation. Or if you wanted to use it as an ability, then you still have both your actions during that activation.
And the ability, just to clarify, doesn't require dice. It's like a free ability. It just takes up that ability use for that model.
Yep. Instead of using a different ability on your card or using dice from your ability pool, you just use your consumable artifact. And so we're going to test that out, see how it works. But hopefully we use more of those, use more artifacts. They play more a role in the game. And, we see those crossed off faster. And then, maybe you're more likely to want to roll for more artifacts in that phase, right? So we will see.
So this is my first time hearing about this proposed change, and I like it. I liked it more when I thought it was going to use dice, because I feel like that had a more meaningful trade-off and maybe doesn't kind of affect the power levels of these lesser artifacts as much. And you could also print out a little additional universal ability just for our campaign that is, slam the brewski, which is double use a lesser artifact as that has an action as no action. So I already had an aesthetic in mind.
What could be interesting is that's how you use your singles.
And so instead of initiative or in addition, just have them there, and then you could use them. Yeah, that's a potentially.
So, if you're interested, if you wanted to create some additional limitation on it, if you felt like it was part of what we're doing here is kind of experiment with, is it work in that space? Because right now it feels like they're just not used at all. The consumable ones, they just stick on a model forever until you replace it with something better.
But some of them you just got to use ahead of time. The vial of Jabbersite blood lasts for the entire game. So you usually want to use it on that first turn when maybe you're just maneuvering, that you can use it and then just in prep for the battle later turns, because you never want to use it instead of taking another action like you talked about. So
yep.
Yeah, and I think part of the challenge is, this was a discussion that kind of started on the Warcry Warhammer Facebook page, and then we carried out a little separately from that. But for example, the perishable items, they're always in effect. There's a 50% chance you lose them at the end of the game, but they're always in effect. And so you never lose that extra action. You don't. So that's why we kind of thought, well, maybe we have to have some mechanic to maybe make consumables more similar in effect. And, so having it as an ability. So you can't use an ability that you might want to use for a double, triple, quad for that model if you want to use that. Or you could use it as an action and still have access to it. We thought maybe that would be an okay trade-off, especially with monsters and mercenaries. If you fight a monster, especially with the checklist, if you fight a monster you can't tame, you essentially rip it apart for 3 rolls on the lesser artifact table. And that sounds great, but if you get a bunch of these consumables that you never use, then it's not really an incentive to fight a monster to get more artifacts. And so we were trying to find some way to spend that currency, so to speak.
Yeah. I think, again, this is for all these, we want to be experimental. We want to be open to kind of trying to find an opening spot for it to land where it can be interesting. And again, we err on the side of permissive, let people use it and then dial it back. And we'll see what happens with it. But no, I get that's out of the gate. It seems different. So Josh, why don't you cover the last one? What was our solution that we want to try out and test for convergences during this league?
No, definitely. So, as we talked a little bit about, we faced, we had a lot of people who had challenges on their convergences. Some people who played multiple convergences and failed them all and decided to start new warbands or restart their campaign quests entirely. And some people who just dropped off. So we tried to think of a variety of ways to handle this. From anything from they try it twice and they automatically pass, or they pay a certain amount of glory, so I think Eric, you kind of put a nice spin on it where, okay, you can pass with diplomacy. So you can choose diplomacy over combat, and then you just got to touch base with Eric or myself in the league, and for the cost of one dominated territory, if you had one that you wanted to spend, or glory, up to 1d6 for the first convergence, 2d6 for the second. Of glory points, you could spend that and say, okay, we're going to bypass this convergence with diplomacy rather than combat, and then get all the rewards and everything, etc. However, your final convergence, you still had to beat to complete your quest, because we thought that was absolutely mandatory to have any sort of say in actually completing your quest.
Yeah. So early on, that very first one, if you have 1d6, it's a random roll, so it's kind of puts a little bit of gambling in there, right? You could pay 1 glory and get through your first convergence, and in this case, you get the stuff, and you can decide how good you feel about yourself after that. But it got a little bit harder as you got to your second one. It could be 12 glory, or it could be one of your dominated territories, which has a little bit more sting to it because a lot of your challenges and stuff require those dominated territories. So there's hopefully some thought in there that it wouldn't just be an easy decision.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, kind of, we would want to just Josh or I to kind of just see how somebody's feeling, and kind of give them, kind of remind them of that option if they feel like they're hitting a wall with it or something like that, and they just want to get past it. So there's a little bit of narrative reasoning. Not sure if people are going to want to do that, or if maybe if you give them that easy way out and that it's a choice, that choosing to keep battling and going up against that thing will feel better, right? It's not just a force, but it's their choice to do that. Mm-hmm. But maybe that'll make the uphill battle that some of those can be more meaningful. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that one, Paven?
I like it. One thing I don't like is I don't think it should be called diplomacy, because that is not, there's no place for diplomacy in the 8 points. It should be called, I don't know, like trickery or bribery, but like
coercion.
A way of like defeating the challenge that is underhanded but still very
bribery.
Evil.
That's fair. That's
so
fair.
That's my only thought.
Yeah.
So maybe we could put something where you could of those things that you mentioned, all of those are potential names, and you get to decide how you converged it.
Yeah, like how you got around it. Did you bribe a local warlord, or did you sneak past everybody, or did you, I don't know,
assassinate?
Just kill everybody in their beds and then move on.
Yeah, no, I like that. We require narrative justification.
I don't know if you can give them a really good or positive narrative justification. Yeah, so that's kind of the way we're going to handle it, is give them an out, but that it has some cost to it, both narratively and mechanically. All right, now let's talk about some of the things that we chose to do to kind of make league-specific rules. I guess one of the things that we wanted to address between new players and more experienced players in the league, and that gap between someone who's starting off with their brand new warband that doesn't have any artifacts or glory or experience or numbers on the table, dominated territories, is to give them some incentives for joining the league. So you might say, hey, we're 3 weeks in, do you want to join the league? And they're like, well, I think everybody's already started, they've got warbands already kind of figured out. So in this case, we've decided to if you're joining the league for the first time, no, just joining the league at all, right? Right. You get 1 glory and 1 lesser artifact roll for each week the league has been running. So on week 4, if you're joining the league, you're going to get +4 glory, and you're going to roll for 4 rolls on the artifacts table. And you're not advancing in your quest per se. You still got to fight through your battles and whatnot, but you've got a little something to get you started, so that if you're wanted to spend some glory to put more models on the table, if you wanted to roll, get some more artifacts, so you have something more to play with in the games, that you got a little bit more of a starting spot. Any thoughts or comments on that, Paven or Josh?
Yeah, I think it's a nice addition, and it's kind of derived from one of the feedback comments we had gotten from the first league, that sometimes that disparity made it difficult for people to just get involved in the league. So I think, we didn't want to go too strong, and I think this is a good balance, and I guess we'll just see how it works out.
The next piece of addition to kind of promoting the league, etc., if you have a friend that signs up, so kind of if you get somebody else to join the league, you get 3 glory points. Just an incentive to ask more people in. It's not a ton. It's not going to break anybody's, put anybody over the edge, but maybe it's just a thank you for inviting somebody in. Then we've got painted warband. If you play with an all painted warband of 1,000 points or more, I guess we have to do approximately 1,000 points, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm.
That you get +2 glory points for playing that game with all painted models.
It's a one-time reward. Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, I thought that's what because I think I always assumed it was a one-time reward, but yeah, I guess that maybe we didn't clarify.
No, we didn't. I guess we have to talk. No, but the idea there is, again, it may be the downside is of doing it every time would be that you may not want to start a new warband, which,
right.
But no, we didn't put any points in there for starting a new warband. But basically to encourage painting models and, giving people kind of a more reason and motivation to put more stuff on the table that's painted. Just wanted to add some points in there. And it's kind of like how, orcs in space that are painted red go faster. Warbands in Warcry that are painted have more glory. They get more noticed. And then one of the things, since we're introducing monster, the challenges, and that means that not, when we were playing with convergences and somebody was being the adversary for somebody in the convergence, we decided that they would progress their own quest. And I don't know that that's what the stock rules say. So that might have been something we had already changed, but basically
you do. Any games you play progress your main quests.
Yeah. And so in this case though, when you play, if somebody wants to play a challenge battle, meaning that they go up against a monster, then somebody has to pilot the monster, and they're not progressing their own warband's battle, their quest. So as a balance of that if you play as a monster for somebody else's challenge, that you get 3 glory points for your warband. Yeah, it's not really dependent. It's just kind of a thank you, because playing somebody else's challenge battles, it's not thankless. It's still fun to pilot a monster, but it just gives you, if that's the only game you played in that week, then it gives you some progress to make.
And one of the things we kind of thought about is, okay, well, if we have too much glory being handed out, does it impact, does it make some warbands more powerful than others? But we think with the Monsters and Mercenaries edition that the nice thing about challenge battles is it encourages you to play these unique games that are outside of the campaign. And to be able to do that, you have to have dominated territories, which you stake. And so this just helps some of those people get more dominated territories so they can stake those and try out some of those challenge battles, which I think will be fun experiences for people.
Paven, do you have any thoughts on some of those?
I think ways of getting more glory is good for everyone. Because I think the people that win a lot are always going to have more than they need. And then I think everybody else probably needs a little help. I don't know. I don't see any big downside to just handing out glory like candy. Let people, as long as it's not give some people something to do, but the league is only 8 weeks, and I think everybody should be able to get up to that. 6 dominated territories by the end. Like get those allies, be able to run those challenge battles, like field all the minis. So, I'm on board.
Yeah.
You don't prescribe to the idea that mo glory, mo problems?
Oh, yes.
I'm waiting for Pavin to laugh even a little.
I don't. Yeah, I'm thinking of a cute response, but I got nothing. Good one, Aaron.
All right. I don't buy it. All right. Now, the next thing we decided to do was add a layer of things, and this came a little bit. We had some experience with this sort of thing in All Hallows Siege, which was an event we put on last year, and an AOS narrative event, and then we did a little bit of this similarly with the Plunging Spires. Instead, because we don't have podiums, certainly we have the person who has the most first, second, third most glory, which is all right, but some of that's arbitrary, right? Some of that's we've made it a little bit more arbitrary with some of our incentives, and narrative games don't flourish as well when you're focused on best gamer kind of thing. And so these are titles. These are achievements. These are kind of in line with the idea of earning glory in the 8 points. You're alongside, goes hand in hand with that is that you earn titles for yourself, or for your warband. And so these titles are going to be things that we hand out at the end of each league to signify an achievement during the league. So why don't we go ahead and do that same kind of round robin? Pavin, what was one of these? Are there any of these that catch your eye, or that you've thought about striving for, kind of getting into the league?
Well, I always want to win the nice guy award. That one would make me feel the best, because I truly think that's where the money is on being a nice opponent and fun to play against.
The communal capital.
Me. Well, sorry. Go ahead.
The social capital.
Yeah. I want to have the most of the social currencies. But yeah. I mean, everything else is just everything else I want to be able to do incidentally, which is play games and hunt monsters. So yeah.
For me, Monster Hunter kind of was interesting. At the end of the league, the warband that slayed the most monsters. I feel like if you spend a lot of time trying to take on challenges and not your convergences, you should probably get something for that. You're probably not going to be the glory winner, but in its own way. Josh, what was one that you really liked from the list?
Yeah, no, I think one of the other fun ones is God favorite. At the end of the league, the warband with the most destiny levels, and because destiny levels can be so random, it depends on how many games you played, how many models are still on the table, and how many sixes you can roll and or not. And so at the end of the last league, it was really interesting to see, how destiny levels factored in for some people's armies, and how their warband and how many models had multiple and some had none. So I thought it would just be a fun way to kind of compare people's luck with destiny levels at the end of the campaign.
Cool. Yeah. And then we've got, just kind of rounding them out, we've got Glory Seeker, which is who earns the most glory or has the most glory stored up at the end of the league. And to be clear again, it's dominated territories plus any unspent glory. So if you spent glory getting more artifacts or on, mustering more models during battles, that is lost glory. But we all know that sometimes, you add a few more models to your list, it can help you earn more glory in that battle and make up whatever you spend. So it's more of just a way to not have to keep track of how much they've earned in total over the course of the league, but just whatever they end up with at the end.
Yeah. Well, and then you have to decide too. So if you happen to finish your quest and you want to start a new one, you lose all that glory, and it's oh, do I want the title or do I want to start the new quest? So you're gonna balance it out.
Let's see. And then we've got Warmonger at the end of the league, the warband that fought the most battles. So encouraging more games and, getting out outside of Thursdays and playing more with people. Then won the most battles. That's Apex. So that's probably the most likely to be coincide with the most glory, but you never know. And then, so we've got the Glory Seeker, God Favored, Beastmaster, Monster Hunter, Warmonger, Apex, Spirit, and the Spirit Award. So that means all of these things are things that we are tracking. With that, I created a Google poll that is basically the aftermath phase, but being able to write all those things in there. And I think one of the ones that isn't on here is slain models, but I don't know if we put that on the aftermath thing. So whoever slays the most models of your opponent, which again is somewhat of a random thing. First you take them out of action, then they roll on the recovery table. And then, just a couple of things with the in-store swag. Acrylic tokens we're tying to the glory, which is kind of what we did before, because there's not enough to give out to everybody unless, I guess, you could give out a few, but especially the wound tokens, you need quite a few to be useful. And then the chaotic, this season, they've got these alternate art chaotic beast cards. There's both Furies and Raptorixes. And so we're going to tie these to games in the store. And so after 3 games played in the store, you can get one of your cards. After 6 games played in the store, you can pick from the other card. So there's that. We've gotten started. We've had 2 weeks of League as of this recording. Have you guys been playing any of these rules or had any kind of responses or experiences? Josh, how has it been for you?
I think the one that has affected me the most so far is the underdog rule, because I had a game against Paven and I had a game against you where I was able to use the underdog rule and get some bonus glory for challenging your much stronger warbands. And it was a nice boost for my freshly started warband to get that jump on it and help me get to a dominated territory more quickly. I definitely found that helpful.
Paven, have you had a chance to incorporate any of these? I know these are, it's always a danger in having another set of rules on top of the current rules.
I mostly forgot about them. I did give myself the extra underdog glory. After reviewing them just now, I'm trying to figure out whether I should give myself the painted one, but I don't think I do because they were painted last league, and any bonus glory I would have gotten this league would have happened in week 1. And week 1, I was still on my old quest. And so when my glory reset with the new class, I would have lost that bonus painting glory. Or that's how I'm ruling it.
Hey, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I try to be strict but fair with myself.
Fortunately, like we were saying, we kicked off the league the week before we had the event, I think. And we're kind of getting into the holiday season and that sort of stuff. So I would say I feel like this time of year is going to be a little bumpier for the league. But as you were saying, we've got Tome of Champions coming out, potentially a couple new warbands revealing the Scions of the Flame, and if those come out soon. So we've got some things coming up in the new year that are in the end of December and the new year that have another, again, potential to rejuvenate and add more to, people coming back and looking back towards the game. And so we're not going to slack off, but we may see lower numbers through the holidays. But I think if we're consistent, if we have those dates ready for people to come, then if they want to get out of the house, we can be that destination for that. And then kick something off bigger in the new year. And I'd say, again, because of the event, I probably did less communication and promotion of the league starting up than I had the previous. So that's something I can do better on for the next season. Let's talk a little bit about other things that we didn't address or that we didn't change, or things that are interesting about, the league and things that we could do different, either from a rules or from game rules to league rules to, kind of other things to kind of help keep it fun, keep it interesting, keep it different. Josh, what are some things that have come to mind to you in terms of what we could do next, or what might be interesting changes to league play?
Well, I think one thing I'm really interested in doing is having a league a league event. You know, kind of like in the September White Dwarf, there was an arena battle, a league event where warbands got together and played a series of 3 games, and then the warband with the most glory or renown at the end of it was crowned champion of the arena. And it was just kind of set outside of the campaign, a fun activity. I think doing something like that, you know, either midway through or maybe depending on where the holidays fall and where we're at, you know, to try and reignite some of that enthusiasm, you know, maybe have a unique multiplayer game or something like that to kind of bring everybody back for a little bit and keep things rolling would be a fun event to have in the league throughout somewhere.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. Paven, is there any ideas or things that you'd like to bring to the league or do different in the league?
Well, I currently don't put any effort into it, and so I want to keep that going. But things that areas I like to explore are exciting to me is ways to expand the league in a kind of narrative physical space. So do we set our league in a specific location in the Bloodwind Spoils? Do we track where you're winning games, like in the Warhammer store or at home or at an even different location? And those games mean different things for how the campaign is going. Do we like try to tell a cohesive story weaving throughout the campaign? Does like what board you play on matter? And so if you're in the corpse rack mausoleum, does that mean something different for what's happening in our section of the ever sprawling 8 points? All of those ideas are things that I really jam on. I think it's much more, I think, more work to try to figure all that stuff and weave it together, but it's definitely like cool ideas. And you know, we talk about how disconnected everybody's own story is and progress is and how great that is, but maybe there's a way that still can maintain that but weave it back together. So we're all telling one story together. I don't know. Map campaign's also super cool, so I don't know, maybe a map.
I don't know if I've mentioned this on this podcast. Davey, Aaron, and I played a campaign where we tried to just do our own narrative map campaign where we took the Madison area map or local area map, and we like circled different sections of it or territories and named it things based on like real places. And just started kind of like converting our local area into a fantasy landscape. And then tried to like use that as like places to dominate. And so on and so forth. So I love the idea of maybe involving more people in kind of creating that map and, you know, deciding how, or the Firestorm campaigns did that, I think, where you'd pick different location to fight over, and whoever won that battle, you know, earned points towards it or whatever. I think we ended up doing like best of 3. So if somebody won 2 battles in a location or something like that, that could definitely be interesting. And yeah, I like that idea. And you know, if you want to take on the role of lore master for the league, that would not help you do that first thing you said, which is do nothing.
Key objective here.
Yeah. So I mean, it's up to you. For me, I think I'm kind of interested in really leaning into the organizational part of this, you know, and it has nothing to do with not being able to finish my final convergence or, you know, be thwarted at every angle by my friends and having fun. But maybe I want to focus on, you know, the Varangard warband, some monsters, and kind of being host as people are coming in and getting people games, etc. So like take games last. Which I've tried to do, but sometimes that's hard if not everyone's coming in at the same time. But also, you know, to run monsters for people and, you know, kind of create some more of that. Be the villain, I guess, for more people, or the adversary or the realm master, game master role. So that's been interesting. That's been an interesting thought for me in terms of just trying to like take that on so people can play more of their own games. And with their own war bands and that sort of thing, but we'll have to see how it goes. Again, I don't want to take the option to pilot a monster away from anybody. Yeah, I'm really interested to see how these rules work, some of these tweaks and changes, and see if there's more to do. Because Paven, you brought up a good thought in terms of the consumable. It can swing over to the other direction, so it could be interesting there. All right. Any other kind of forward-looking ideas in terms of leagues, or last bit of advice that you would share with any listener thinking about starting a league and experiencing all that we've had the pleasure of experiencing?
I would just say one thing I think would be fun is, I don't think there are many people in our group that have played a multiplayer game. I think it's just, Paul, yourself, and myself are probably the only people who've played a multiplayer game. So I think getting some people to do that maybe one week where we all get together and play the multiplayer game, I think would be a new experience for a lot of people. And just in terms of leagues and advice, I think picking whatever path is the most fun. Getting a good group of people and building your stories together has definitely been the highlight for me, and motivates me to do more hobby and bring it together and share ideas on schemes and painting and terrain and everything. It's been a lot of fun that way.
How about you, Paven?
Last thoughts is I want to probably try to play more games of Warcry at other locations in the area and just see if I can meet a new slice of Warcry player that we might be missing out playing in the same place every week. That'd be a cool thing to do. Piece of advice. Well, I don't do anything for leagues, so I don't have any advice besides they're super fun, and I think you can do it in a way that's really low effort. And so I would just recommend just like picking a night and being consistent, and I think that's how you build community.
Yeah. With that, gentlemen, thank you again for joining me for running this league. And Paven, even though you have zero say whatsoever in how we run the league, you bring a ton of great energy, and you're there to play fun games, and that matters even more than our dumb ideas. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome.
It's time to put a muzzle on this episode. If it was a good dog, support the show with a positive review on iTunes, sharing it with friends, joining us for hobby discussions at themortalrealms.com/Discord, or leave a tip at themortalrealms.com/Patreon. More content is available at themortalrealms.com and on Twitter at Dogs of Warcry.
Welcome to the Midwest side, those ruthless narratively driven podcast you'll ever turn right. I'll be in fall. We get so fast, dice rolling below in the swamp, never stolen known to the dogs of Warcry.
Have you guys listened to the end of a TMR episode? Aaron usually puts bloopers at the end.
No, I have not.
I try not to listen, so I don't feel bad.
I just got my bloop at the end at the cities one.